I'm John Batchelor. Mary Kissel of the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and Opinion Journal. She's the host each day. Is here when we're joined by our colleague Ed Hayes, an attorney in New York, who's very, very close and careful about the NYPD and what started out as an outrage, an unacceptable circumstance of a young family being intimidated, harassed, attacked, and the father being pulled from the car and beaten on the streets of Manhattan. This is on a beautiful Sunday some 10 days or more ago, has turned into a scandal that looks very much like it will damage the reputation of the NYPD and go to the heart of the question about Commissioner Kelly and the discipline of this vast and extremely able force, the NYPD that we depend upon. Ed, a very good evening to you. Mary, you've got a headline from the NY Post right now.
I do, and the headline is NYPD Internal Affairs Cop, part of biker ride that ended in beating. That's from Kirsten Conley in the New York Post.
Ed, what does it mean, internal affairs, and what does it mean that an NYPD internal affairs officer was part of this gang that marauded?
His job is to supervise the discipline and honesty of the police department. The internal affairs' job is to do exactly what this guy did not do, which is to make sure the policemen do not engage in activity that is inconsistent with their role in society.
How many cops, Mary? How many cops were involved?
So the Post reports three involved in this. And in this particular cop, Eddie, he waited, and I quote, several days before coming forward to fess up. Well,
it started being clear that they were videos, so he didn't come forward to fess up. He came forward when it became obvious that they were caught.
This event started September 29th, and if you've not seen the video, where are you? What planet did you just arrive on? But in any event, we're looking at an intimidation process that went on for many miles on the West Side Highway. If you don't know, this is a highway that goes by some of the most precious real estate in the solar system. We're not talking about something where you're in a neighborhood where there's violence. They're flying by the Upper West Side. The father and mother and child, they're almost textbook out of a children's story. They're in a Range Rover, and they're intimidated and chased by these bikers. Now we learned, and we're pushing it, Eddie, we're pushing that the NYPD was present. So, Eddie, do we need a commission? Do we need a major investigation? Do we need to pull in all their colleagues and find out when their commanders, when their watch officers knew that they participated in that?
Need to do that. Either the Internal Affairs Bureau needs to set up a special task force, or somebody needs to set up a special task force. Because remember, there's a lot of these bikers clubs, a lot of them, and you really need to know how many policemen are involved. Here, remember, one of the people they had was really trying to break through the windows. And he was the undercover in charge of keeping an eye on this group in terms of their criminality. I mean, I don't know what else you could do that was worse than that. If there was ever a time when the undercover says, "Hey, stop! I'm a policeman," this was the time.
Eddie, when you think about violence in New York, you don't think about biker gangs. You think about getting shot in a bad part of the South Bronx or Central Brooklyn. You think about getting pushed onto the subway track by some crazy person. Is this biker gang threat new? Did the NYPD know about this, or did this sort of come as a surprise?
Years ago, you had the Hells Angels who were involved in a lot of criminality, but these groups are really not criminal organizations in the sense that they support themselves by engaging in narcotics trafficking, gun sales, various kinds of interstate frauds. But what it is they're a bunch of guys that get more and more out of control as time goes on because nobody stops them, and then they start doing these things where they harass drivers and they see themselves as kings of the road, and they scare people. And when people get scared, people get hurt.
Commissioner Kelly, is he in trouble, Eddie?
Yes.
I know.
Remember now, this comes right off stop and frisk.
Right. I know that in Midtown Manhattan, it's pretty routine during the evenings to have these bikes float by. They're very aggressive. They're very noisy. Do we need to ban motorcycles from Manhattan?
I don't really have an intelligent opinion about that. I personally find motorcycles very dangerous, and I don't approve of them. I mean, a very good friend of mine, a young boy that I knew from childhood, well, he wasn't a young boy when he died, he was 32, but I just think they're very dangerous. I don't see how you drive in an urban area because there's so many things you can run into. So I'd be inclined to ban them from Manhattan, but they certainly are out there, and you can hear them. And then you see them curving around cars and going very fast. It looks incredibly dangerous to me. But whether or not you can ban them, I would ban them. Now, whether or not you can get that through, I don't know.
Eddie, is it right to paint the NYPD, though, with a broad brush and say that, something has gone horribly wrong? I mean, could this just be the work of a couple bad actors?
Yes, it is the work. The police department is still one of the best in the country. But when you look at this kind of activity by individuals, and then you also look at the breakdown in discipline involved in stop and frisk, because what made stop and frisk a failure in the sense of it was a success in fighting crime, but it was a failure in terms of a constitutional sense, was that they weren't disciplined in how they approached people. They approached people in too rough a manner. Their judgment in who they approached and who they did not was flawed. They weren't properly supervised. So you come off with an actions by a few individuals following after something that was a major policy in the police department that was rejected by the courts. So yes, the police department in Kelly is under tremendous pressure.
We've discussed a possible change of police commissioner, the man who ran Boston and Los Angeles. Would he clean this up, Eddie?
Oh, Brad, well, he's a client of mine, as you know.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of his. I mean, he's a very creative thinker, and he also, the big difference between him and Kelly, who's very competent, is that Brad knows how to spread authority and promote and give latitude to people that he knows can do.
I mentioned Mr. Bratton because he was mentioned by the man who's leading in the mayoral race right now, Bill de Blasio, as a choice. And this crisis is upon the election. We expect both mayoral candidates to comment on it. The incident from September 29th now exploding at the NYPD. Mary Kissel, Ed Hayes, I'm John Batchelor.